Our next speaker is Gary Headrick of San Clemente Green. But before I introduce him, I'd like to share with you a portion of quite a lengthy letter that we received from Rear Admiral Leonard Herring yesterday in support of this actual meeting. And there's a message, and it goes like this. Dear concerned citizens of San Diego, I'm writing this memorandum in support of the efforts of those presenting today and their respective organizations. By way of introduction, I am a retired Rear Admiral, Len Herring, former commander, Navy Region Southwest, and current co-chair of Congressman Levin's Songs Task Force. Over the course of the last 2 years, I've been deeply involved in the efforts by which this meeting today is unfortunately being convened. While not an expert in the field of nuclear engineering, I am very experienced in regulatory behavior, regulatory administration, proper investigation procedures, and documenting of findings, proper training techniques, and certification requirements utilized by the Navy to handle nuclear weapons and hazardous materials and leaderships. Exploring issues concerning songs during these last 2 years has been challenging. I'm going to skip to the last 2 paragraphs here. This is quite a long letter, but if you'd like to read it, and I encourage you to do so, we're going to publish it very shortly at grassrootsinfo.org/San Onofre. That's grassrootsinfo.org/San Onofre. Now, I'm pleased to introduce Gary Headrick. Gary Headrick is a public citizen in the tradition of Socrates. In 2007, Gary and his wife, Lori, formed San Clemente Green to promote a sustainable future for their community. By 2010, their work with the city resulted in a sustainability action plan that guides programs and policies to this day. San Clemente Green led the grassroots effort to shut down the San Onofre nuclear generating station starting in 2010, when whistleblowers accurately predicted the demise of the nuclear power plant. And that happened in 2012. Are you ready, Gary?
Yes, that sounds great. Thank you. What a panel we have, and thank you so much for allowing me to be part of it. I'll go on with my presentation here. And I think I'll follow up where Kathy left off with such powerful statements about the most important lessons that we can learn from her experience. And it's that the nuclear disaster at Fukushima, which is far from over, was entirely preventable. It's just another example of decision makers ignoring experts because they're telling them something they don't want to hear. I remember watching this story unfold and witnessing the complete failure of the most well-prepared nuclear energy country in the world. Seismologists that were predicting a massive 9.0 earthquake and tsunami had been dismissed and ignored. That sound familiar? Edison must heed this lesson and respect the unpredictable power of nature. Well, there's no question that we live in a tsunami zone with reminders like this all around. Edison's own documents show that they're in a tsunami zone, but how can it be so easily dismissed as a threat that is not credible? This is the tsunami wall that we're relying on to keep us safe. Take a close look at the wall on the right. See how it's holding up to this harsh, salty environment. Metal and concrete do not do well so close to the ocean as we see in this dilapidated wall. We can expect the same is true for the thin canisters that were only meant for short-term storage just beyond this wall. In a moment, you'll see the scene on the left come to life in a very brief video. Few people have had the opportunity to see the tsunami wall from such close proximity. You can get wet if you're not careful. I guess I should have been more careful. Edison has a different way of representing the tsunami wall. Look how they use an extremely low camera angle at very low tide and see the tiny person way in the distance to make the wall seem larger. Knowing what you know now, doesn't it seem to call into question their own credibility? You would expect them to be more concerned about how much wall is left above high tide when they tell us how much protection it provides. San Onofre, which was by far the most unsafe nuclear power plant in the country, was doing like Japan did by ignoring what they didn't want to hear. The new steam generator project was behind schedule and well over budget, so managers retaliated against their own engineers who were saying that more testing was needed before new steam generators were put into service. Whistleblowers came to us because we were the only environmental organization listening to them, and we agreed to keep their identities protected. Employees finally gave us what the news media was clamoring for: hard evidence and internal documents, hoping to buy time for more testing. This particular document was about the results from a questionable confidential survey showing 25% of the workforce feared retaliation for bringing up safety concerns, but it still wasn't enough to stall the restart. On January 31st, 2012, less than 2 years later, our worst fears were realized. Fortunately, the engineers were quick to do an emergency shutdown when just a few of the many thousands of tubes started to leak radiation into the air we breathe. Extremely violent vibrations resulted from a computer error in the design of the new steam generators, which underestimated the vibration potential by 400%. It became obvious that Edison had not learned a lesson because their proposal was to run the other twin generator for 5 months at 70% to see what would happen. Warnings from nuclear operators went unheeded, and it looked like Edison would get their way once again. But we had a surprise for them. We had flown Naoto Kan, the Prime Minister of Japan at the time of the accident, to San Diego for an emergency meeting and press conference. He was flanked by 2 former NRC commissioners who oversaw the accidents at 3 Mile Island and Fukushima. They all advised against restarting the defective reactor. But would it be enough to change Edison's mind? Well, you can imagine the huge relief we felt on the morning of June 7th, 2013, when Edison threw in the towel, only 3 days after the meeting with Naoto Kan. It was big news around the globe, dashing ambitions of the nuclear industry. As you've already heard, nothing has changed. We're being told that floods, tsunamis, earthquakes, and terrorist attacks are nothing to be concerned about because they're simply not credible until they are, and then it'll be too late. Edison has left us with no way out if something doesn't go exactly as planned, which always seems to be the case. Simply put, we need a dry transfer system, also known as a hot cell, and an extremely robust bunker to protect nuclear waste from these very real threats. Without these structures in place, it's only a matter of time before thin canisters begin to fail with no way to stop it from getting completely out of control. Fortunately for us, our local congressman, Mike Levin, has aggressively sought answers to the elusive goals of getting the nuclear waste at San Onofre moved to a safer location. Here's an insightful clip from a recent interview I did with him.
When I started, I sat down, and you may have been there, I forget. I was with a group very early, and we went to go and meet with Edison, and we were there with Pedro Pizarro, who's the president of Edison International, president of the parent company. And I like and respect Pedro. He's a very smart guy, but I told him, I don't represent the interests of the utility in Congress. I represent the interests of my constituents. And I think that's the clear difference. I'm not just going to do his bid. I'm not just going to listen to what Edison's perspective is without getting the informed perspective from constituents. And so that's why the task force started. I just think inherently having a group that was started by the utility, it's kind of hard to have a objective perspective on things. So I think we've been very successful, and I'm grateful to you, Gary, and I'm grateful to everybody that's participated on the task force over the last 3+ years. And, we're really just getting started. It's going to take time.
Well, thank goodness for people like Congressman Levin, and also for Admiral Herring, who is co-chair of the task force. He was responsible for all things on his ship that were nuclear. He is another outstanding voice of reason with the experience and credentials to back it up. Here are some short video clips I put together from a virtual press conference with Admiral Herring and Congressman Levin about the task force findings. I want you to hear the warnings from both in their own words.
Even some of the casks that have been utilized over the years are nearing or have passed their life expectancy. If you look through the report, you'll see the storage protocols that are now being utilized seem to be very dysfunctional and almost driven by industry as opposed to the regulatory safety requirements that provide us the opportunity for both the safe handling, the storage, and long-term commitment for its monitoring. Once it's stored, it's not like a garbage pile. It'll decrete by itself. It takes hundreds of thousands of years for this material to no longer be a hazard to our environment. And we need to monitor how that works. And I think that this report, again, clearly shows how the relaxations over the course of time have put us at risk. And I hope that this is a piece of the report that really comes out and causes people concern as to where we're going.
Considering federal legislation that requires spent nuclear fuel canisters to have a design life of at least 100 years. Failure risks of canisters due to stress, corrosion, cracking must not be overlooked. And I'm grateful to our members of the task force that highlighted the issues specifically with the Holtec canisters being used at SOMS. The work of the task force really solidified for me the importance of not being satisfied with the current Nuclear Regulatory Commission and Department of Energy structure. And the canister issue is one that was reinforced. Again, not something that we haven't heard, but specific legislation at the federal level mandating a 100-year life for the design of nuclear fuel canisters. And then making sure that we're doing everything possible with regard to inspection. You see what they're doing in other parts of the world. Switzerland immediately comes to mind at some of their hardened and enclosed buildings and their use of the thicker cast as opposed to the thin wall canisters. We must do better. We need to prioritize the safety and health and well-being of our community, not the profits of the nuclear industry.
If you read that slide, there's some important information there, and time is not on our side. The only route for nuclear waste is under threat from sea level rise. Who knows what condition those tracks will be in when we're actually ready to move the nuclear waste to a safer location. We need a different kind of tsunami, a human wave of unrelenting pressure to insist on more transparency, public awareness, and good science to find the best way forward. Edison should understand from past experience that we are here for the long haul, and we will continue to raise our concerns until they meet our reasonable expectations. From my own personal experience, thinking that we can't get a hot cell and a robust bunker built is what I'd call not credible. It's the only sensible next step for us to take. We shouldn't have to work so hard at making safety come first, but that's just the way it is. We've proven that we can overcome what are seemingly insurmountable odds. Our success in preventing an experimental restart of a defective nuclear reactor happened when we least expected it. It will likely be the same again with getting a hot cell and bunker system installed at San Onofre. We can get this done if we support the efforts of dedicated groups and individuals like the ones presenting tonight by staying informed and answering calls to action when needed. Together, we can protect our beautiful, pristine coastline for all of California and beyond. Like so many problems the world faces today, truth, commitment, and cooperation must prevail. with the priority always being for the greater good of the people and our one and only planet. Thank you.